So for those of you who came late this morning, I'm not going to reread the scenario I started with, but the basic gist of it is the United Nations gathers together a council to create a new religion to make it so that people stop fighting with each other. The question that is asked is, would you join that new religion? Do you think it'll get people to stop fighting with one another? I put it out to you. What do you guys think? Anybody can feel free to chime in.
I think people will always find something to disagree about. So, and look, that was tried somewhat by Christianity throughout the world. You know, with all the missionaries and everything else, and that certainly didn't solve anything. Of course, they also did it with the sword and the gun to a great extent. So I think people will still find things to disagree about. It's just our nature as a species.
I should say, as far as languages are concerned, you know, there was Esperanto. Somebody tried, right?
Yeah.
With the universal language that people would speak together. We can't even agree on that. So
your scenario brings us back to the Tower of Babel.
That's right.
Exactly.
Which I'm not sure we want.
Right.
Right. Tell me more. Tell me more about that.
Well, I think
I find the idea attractive, but the way I practice Judaism these days, it would require me giving up too many of my own rituals and the things that seem important to me. So whereas this country could use more unity at this point in time, to say nothing of a religious type of unity, like the others, I would find it impractical at this point.
Well, I also think, I mean, at the basic premise of almost all religions is the concept of love thy neighbor as thyself. And we can't even seem to get our arms around that, let alone anything else. So I think that, you know, that's more of the issue than anything else. If we just stuck to that basic premise, then that would solve a lot of the issues.
Unless everyone joined that one religion, there's still going to be some, you know, if not everyone joined, there would still be splinters of what's going on, you know. So we could join it, but there would be others that wouldn't. So what difference would it make then?
Yeah.
Also, I think
all
throughout the Torah, it keeps, you know, God clearly keeps saying, you know, not to worship idols. Don't be an idol worshiper, and it's kind of going against everything that we are, you know, as Jews, is not believing in one God and not believing that, you know, the Torah was, you know, is the word of God and has been passed down for generations.
Right. The new religion would have no divine inspiration. It would be United Nations inspiration. So there would be no basis.
And let's say the United Nations is very underwhelming as far as its inspiration. Sorry, Judy, go ahead. I saw you were waiting.
Oh, I was going to say also that we should be suspect of anything that comes out of the United Nations. We have seen their immorality and hypocrisy. And I think that it's as if we will go into Baskin Robbins, even though we say Alav Shalom for the Baskin Robbins on Lower Roswell, we go in, we expect a variety of flavors. Go to Howard Johnson's, variety of flavors. If there's only one flavor, I think it's impossible to accommodate everybody's tastes. And it's understood simply with ice cream, and alachad kama v'kama, how much more so when it comes to faith and religion. What is anathema to us might be something that our Christian friends or Muslim friends or Hindu friends embrace. So I think it's a noble challenge, but one that would not achieve anything.
Basically, I think most disputes are over power and money rather than religion. And religion is usually brought in after to aggravate things.
Doesn't hear anyone else talking?
I don't know.
Guys, I think poor Judy is trying to talk. Judy, you have to unmute yourself, though.
I forgot what I said.
I'm good.
Wait, I'm not on mute.
I think love thy neighbor is a premise, and also Oseh Shalom, not just by Israel, but the entire world. And when I say Oseh Shalom now, I'm not just saying Israel. I say Israel, but I also say United States because it's needed badly here.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Wouldn't it be great if all of our political parties could come together and somebody could decide what the best ideas were of every party and then we go forward? No, of course not. Nobody would be happy with that, right? I mean, that's just the point. But in any case, let me explain why I asked this question. And I don't think it's necessarily a fair question because clearly I'm preaching to the choir today. You're all here on Shabbat morning in a Jewish service, right? Learning with me. I want to share with you that this was not a scenario that I came up with. It was taken from a book by my colleague, Rabbi Eddie Feinstein. He wrote a book called Tough Questions Jews Ask. And I used this book as a confirmation class curriculum with our 10th graders. So just this past week, I posed this very same question to our 10th grade students. And what was great was that all of my confirmation class students said that no, they wouldn't join this new religion, which was really good because I'm not sure that your confirmation class is really the place where you want to get your students to unconfirm their commitment to Judaism. So I'm really glad that they all confirmed their commitment by saying that they would not join that religion. Most of the kids, it might not surprise you to find out, had a lot of the same reasons that all of you did for not joining this religion. The number one reason that they all agreed on was because they said they didn't think it would actually bring peace to the world. Like many of you said, they're smart enough to understand that conflict in general is usually about larger systemic issues and that religion just comes later. So if you look at the Middle East, for example, you know, it's not just a religious conflict, it's the land conflict, it's a historical conflict. There's lots going on, and it doesn't really, although people will say it's a religious conflict, it's about a lot more than just religion. And so once we crossed that bridge as a confirmation class this past Monday, that then led us to discuss, well, what would it actually take to bring peace to the world? And my kids had lots of really great answers to that questions, but I want to share with you this Shabbat, the one that for me was the most poignant and the most beautiful, that was shared by one of our kids who said this. He said, if we could only see B'Tselem Elohim, I want to make sure I quote this child correctly. We had just studied that unit. If we could only see the image of God in other people, in other religions, or people we disagree with, that student said that would bring peace to the world, right? If only we could see God in each other, then there would be peace, and not the need certainly for another religion. When we come to this week's parasha, Vayishlach, we all see both very tragic and difficult moments, but our parasha opens with a beautiful moment of peace in the midst of a conflict. You all know that moment. It's not the one we read this morning, but it's the story of Jacob and Esau, and they're reuniting together. In that moment, Jacob is very anxious. He hasn't seen Esau in decades, and so he comes up to him, and we all know the story. Esau approaches not by himself, but with 400 men. It looks like in that moment, for an outsider, that World War III is about to ensue between these two brothers. Only what we see in this particular moment is that's not what happens. In fact, they embrace, and it's in this moment that Jacob says something to Esau, and it might be, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful, overlooked moments in the Torah. Jacob looks at Esau, they've embraced, and he says, Achi, my brother, ra'iti panecha kirot panei Elohim. Jacob says to Esau, Esau, to see your face is like looking at the face of God. I'm looking at the face of God. Now, you may say, hold on a second, Jacob could just trying to be humble here. He thank God, he's grateful, he didn't get killed. But I actually believe there's something more at play in this particular moment. Why don't Jacob and Esau kill each other? It's because of this verse, Ra'iti panecha kirot pnei Elohim. Esau, Jacob says, I look at you and I see the face of God. And that makes perfect sense in the moment. Jacob expects that he's going to see hate and anger. But what he sees is Pnei Elohim. He sees the face of God in his brother. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun. He sees the face of a God who is merciful. He sees the face of a God who may not bring peace to the whole world, but at the very least at this moment can bring peace between two brothers. Jacob and Esau don't have to form a new religion, right? There's no world religion of peace at the end of this story. In fact, they go their separate ways. Only they are two people who disagree and nonetheless can see the face of God in the behavior and the attitudes of one another. As Jews, we've been historically experts in the idea of disagreeing. We invented the word kvetch. You all know the joke about one Jew and 21 opinions. I want to tell you, my Nana of blessed memory was the queen of bringing Passover food back to ShopRite after Passover and arguing for a refund. Okay, she knew how to argue it out. And by the way, she was also the queen of arguing that the food at the restaurant was never good enough and would always make the waiter take it back and bring her another portion. We Jews, we have a thing about disagreeing. We love to argue. And yet over time, Chazal, our sages of blessed memory, created a framework for disagreeing. And that framework was being able to see the God in each other. L'rot Pnei HaElohim. And they called it, in their words, by the way, machloket l'shem shamayim, disagreeing for the sake of heaven. There are hundreds of recorded disputes between the houses of Hillel and Shammai in Jewish literature. There are hundreds of disagreements where they treated one another with respect. Some of you may remember I told the story about when I once attended the World Zionist Congress 4 years ago. This recent one, by the way, was a near disaster. That's another sermon. But I'll never forget what happened when two people on the stage, two grown adults, came to blows and started hitting each other. Right after that fact, two young Australians took to the podium, teenagers, and they talked about machloket l'shem shamayim. You had one kid from a secular party, another kid who was Orthodox, and they were friends from going to school, and they talked about how ashamed they were to see grown Jews not treating each other with respect that they deserved. That's an example of L'rot Pnei Elohim. That is what it means to have disagreements, but to see God in each other. I want to take an opportunity this Shabbat to share with all of you now an exciting development in our community that has been years in the making, but has been a project that I have been working on since the beginning of the pandemic. And I think that the foundation of this project fits into this very rubric of L'rot Pnei Elohim. How is it that when we have Jews who disagree with one another, we can still come together and be together at the same time? Recently, for what I suspect is probably the first time in a long time, the rabbis of Eitz Chaim, Chabad of Kab, Kol Emeth, Beth Tikva, and Kehilat Chaim met over Zoom together, all with one shared common goal, and that is to discuss ways to raise the profile of what we call the East Cobb Roswell Jewish community. Now, I'm not old enough to remember the Oldsmobile commercials, but some of you probably are. They say, quote, you remember it used to say, not your grandfather's Oldsmobile, right? Not your grandfather's Oldsmobile. Well, when it comes to advertising where we live to the next generation of young Jews, I want to start saying the following refrain. Not only your grandparents' East Cobb Roswell, but something for you too. Look at what our community has built. Not only the shuls, but the other important stuff. Bagelicious, kosher donut places, cookie shops, a Kroger with a dedicated kosher food section. Our community has tremendous Jewish offerings, and we are in the process right now as synagogues of coming together to discuss other exciting opportunities for how we can make sure that our community is a destination for young Jews looking to move to the city of Atlanta. I think we're often overlooked by young people when they move to the suburbs. After all, said one of the rabbis on the call, who wants to move where your parents live? That's so boring. It's like driving an Oldsmobile. Well, Now we in the leadership are going to do something about it. We're in the process of looking to apply for grants from Federation's new Jewish Communities Fund to sponsor programs that are going to raise the profile of our community. And we're looking seriously at both pre and post-pandemic for ways that we as a community can come together. So that we can demonstrate our collective strength from joint Jewish educational ventures to increased opportunities for Jewish community gathering. And I want to tell you, as the one who's been really coordinating this effort along with my colleagues, that there's a lot that's very gratifying about all of this. It's not only a reminder that we're all Jews, it's a reminder that even though we are Jews who practice differently, that we can see God in each other's faces. No matter what shul we attend, there's more to life than our disagreements. There is arevut, mutual responsibility that everyone in the Jewish world and community has for one another. Perhaps Jacob and Esau understood what our hypothetical United Nations task force on one world religion did not. Our differences don't have to lead us to conflict and strife. But as Rabbi Lewis said, it's more like Baskin Robbins. If we can appreciate and see God in the different flavors, then we will be stronger together. Jacob says to Esau, Ra'iti panecha kirot panei Elohim. Esau, I saw God in your face. May all of us in this spiritual space bring peace to our small spaces in our worlds, but also to our very large space by always seeing God in one another.